Welcome back, and on this episode I'm going to tell you guys about manual mode and the advantages it offers if you are trying to learn but don't fully understand what it is. But I'm going to tell you about the advantages it offers when you're out there shooting. Before I touch on the subject of what manual mode is and all of its fun advantages, I want to talk about light metering real quick. And what light metering is that little line with numbers you see when you open up your camera and you look through the viewfinder. You'll see a 0, and on either side is a 1 or 2, and they have a plus or negative sign. And what that is that's telling you your exposure level, whether or not your photo is going to be overexposed, if it is +1 or +2. 0 is a nice even exposure, and -2 and -1 are going to be darker. This is really important when you're out there shooting. Your light meter can be one of the most useful tools, whether you're shooting inside a studio or you are shooting outside. When talking about manual mode, there are things that everyone should know about, and that is your aperture, which is the amount of focus you want on your image, your ISO, which is your camera's sensitivity to light, and your shutter speed, which is how fast or slow you want your shutter to close, which also affects light. And I'm going to go over each one of those with you guys and tell you a bit about what they are. I wanted to cover aperture, which is one of your many tools in your manual mode arsenal. People also refer to aperture as f-stops. And what an aperture is, it's the amount of focus you're allowing your picture to have. If you are doing headshots for somebody and you just want them and you don't want a nice crisp background in the back, you're going to adjust your aperture to where it only sits on them. That way, when you're opening up your photo in post-production, it's going to be just them and a nice sharp focus, and the background is going to be nice and blurred. This is also a nice feature if you're looking to get what we call a bokeh background, which I love, and I will show you guys an example of a bokeh background in just a second. And aperture also allows you to have a nice flat, all in focus image, which you see a lot of with landscapes and even some portraits. Some people prefer that the entire subject in the background be in focus and everything be nice and sharp. You can do that, but you have to make sure when you do that, you don't want to take away too much from your initial subject, because you don't want your viewers' eyes to get lost. Another great tool when shooting manual is your shutter speed. Now, your shutter speed is the amount of light that is hitting your camera's sensor. Shutter speeds are denoted as fractions when we look at them on the camera, and you might see your fraction show up as 1/250th or 1/80th, and so on and so forth. When you start getting low, like 1/250th of a second, you're going to be seeing more light coming into your camera, which is great if you are shooting at night or you're doing any type of low light photography. I do recommend a tripod and a wired or wireless shutter release. That way you avoid motion blur when taking your photo. Now, if you're shooting at a higher shutter speed, your photo is going to be a little bit darker, but the image is going to be a little bit more crisp and have reduced noise in the image. The last subject I will be covering when shooting manual is your ISO. Your ISO is your camera's sensitivity to light. If you're shooting in an environment that has a lot of light or is already well lit, you'll want to make sure that your exposure is a little bit lower. That way you don't run the risk of blowing out your images, making them too white, or also overexposing them. If you're shooting in an environment that is dark, you are allowed to up your ISO to get a little more light, but be wary, you do run the risk of grain. Grain is something that you will see in post-production. To me, it kind of looks like little pieces of sand. You'll also know this as noise. Side bit, do not get your shutter speed and your ISO confused. They are two different things. I hope you all feel a little more confident with your manual mode on your camera now. now that you understand some of the basics of what manual mode is. It's a lot of fun, and go out there and play with it and learn your camera and see what fun images you produce. Don't forget to keep creating and keep learning as you're doing it. And also, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button for when I post new videos every week. That way, you guys can see the new information I'm going to be sending your way. Thanks for tuning in, guys.